you willing to put aside all speculation and announce to the people here that you are not running in 2020? No.
Overall, wages are down. People are working longer hours for less money. Obama keeps current illegal immigrants.
African Americans being mistreated in society.
Noting that world leaders laughed at President Trump. Thanks to the president's doing trade war.
You know what it is? Our new slogan, 2020. Keep America great.
Hello and welcome back to another year of 2020 Vision, the United States Study Center's weekly look at the latest twists and turns in the race for the White House in the 2020 US presidential election. Over the break, we've had the first Democrats put up their hands as candidates for the party's nomination for president, a partial government shutdown, now the longest of its kind in US history, and a series of sensational reports on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. To help us catch up on all the political drama this week, I'm joined by Jared Mondschein, a former analyst with Bloomberg BNA in Washington, D.C., a research associate with the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City, and he worked for Foreign Policy magazine as well. He's now a senior fellow and senior advisor in the United States Study Centre here in Sydney. Before we meet him, let's have a listen to how we got to where we are on the government shutdown and the border wall negotiations.
I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely. And I am proud, and I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck.
So why is he digging his heels in on immigration now?
That's why.
But why now?
It is self-preservation because he is dead in the water if he doesn't build that wall. Dead.
Mr. President, President Trump, look at the pain and suffering you're causing. So we have one simple message today. 3 words. Open the government.
Jared, thanks very much for joining us for the first episode of 2019.
Thanks for having me.
We got a new compromise offer from the president to Democrats over the weekend, offering an extension of protections for some immigrants in exchange for border wall funding. Are Democrats going to find this offer appealing, do you think?
No, they pretty much rejected that before it was even formally offered. So they've made pretty clear that they're not going to negotiate while the government is shut down, and they will only negotiate once the government is open. And so they'll talk about the wall once everyone is back to work.
Okay. Realistically, how much longer can the president keep the government shut down before the lack of income for federal workers, the potential national security implications for things like airport security and having unpaid Justice Department employees, for example, all force the president's hand?
Yeah, well, he basically has as long as he wants. 25% of the government is shut down, and some 800,000 government workers are going unpaid. But the rest of the government is functioning, and they have funding up to September of this year. And I think the challenge here and the most worrying aspect of it is the fact that there are people leaving government over this.
Yep.
You can't have a job that year to year is going to be used as leverage in some political fighting. And so it's really sad that some of America's best and brightest are probably not going to subject their families to this any longer and instead choose to go in the private sector.
So does that affect public opinion then? I mean, Trump's chosen to own this shutdown thus far, and the conventional wisdom is that he would suffer from this. So, does there come a turning point really where all this impact on federal workers, their impact on their families, it's finally too much and he says, oh, well, I'm going to have to, cut a deal that doesn't benefit me in the short term?
I think he sees the wall as an existential thing for him.
Right.
And there's no way he can compromise on that. I think he hasn't shown really a lot of sympathy for the workers. He really is just focused on the wall and his base.
Right.
Again, you go back to his midterms and what many would see as defeat. He has taken that defeat and instead of trying to compromise and move and get other sides of the aisle and other parties and interested and build a coalition of folks to join his agenda, he's instead really just focusing on his base.
Right.
And what does that base want? Build the wall.
Okay.
And so you're just going to continue to see the build the wall chants continue throughout the rest of his administration until they actually do finally build the wall, whatever that may be, even though no one's really clear what that is at this point.
Is there a real danger, though, that public opinion could swing against the Democrats here? So we just spoke a little bit about how it may affect Trump, but what about the Democrats? I mean, if they're not coming to the table, they're not sort of accepting any compromise, is there a danger then that public opinion turns against them?
Yeah, there's always a danger in a shutdown, and it's always something that politicians try to avoid because it's hard to predict who's going to be hurt the worst. But I think the issue here is that Trump is, as much as he's good at getting headlines, he's not very good at being consistent in his headlines. Right. And so he hasn't really made clear what he wants, how he wants it, and what he's willing to deliver. Again, you go back to just a month ago, and Trump was willing to sort of have a budget deal that did not include the wall. And then you had some conservative commentators criticize him for that. And then he completely changed his tune. So 180 there. And then you have Mitch McConnell, the Senate GOP leader, trying to figure out what Trump wants and what he'll allow on the floor to be voted on. And again, it's not very clear. No one really knows what Trump wants. So the Democrats, on the other hand, they have not lost a single Democrat. They haven't been able to. Trump has not been able to split the Democrats. And even you look at Democrats in Trump country, like in West Virginia, you have Joe Manchin. He's still fully on board with the Democrats. He's not wavering. And it just shows, I think, with that combined with polling, shows that this is really hurting Trump the most.
Yeah. I mean, they really got elected in the midterms, sort of on the basis of sort of defying Trump at, sort of every turn, right? I mean, you'd think that the danger for them with their own voters is if they don't, sort of continue to try and stop the wall from being built. I mean, they were elected on this basis, right?
Well, some of them, but then at the same time, those gains a lot of them were in Trump country. A lot of them were in what you'd call like purple districts. And so they don't necessarily want to just oppose Trump at every corner. They're willing to compromise in areas. And if you just look 10 years ago, the Democrats were actually in favor of a wall. And I think if Trump is able to Trump opens government and then they start a negotiation on the wall, there's a chance the Democrats may go for some sort of wall that they get some political points out of, and Trump does too. But they're just standing their ground, saying they're not going to give in and use government shutdown as a bargaining chip for that wall.
Yeah. You say Democrats were in favor of the wall. We're talking all Democrats here, sort of a party platform, or was it sort of Democrats that were on these states with sort of border, sort of on the Mexican border, for example?
It was close to a party platform. I don't think it was officially a party platform, but it was most Democrats. Even you look 20 years ago, and the Democrats were harder against immigration because of the labor unions. Right. So the shift in the Democratic Party from being sort of against immigration because it threatened wages of the union workers to now being for more immigration. That's been a gradual one. You only have to read a few decades ago to see these like well-known left-wing commentators talking about the threat of illegal immigration. So I think the Republicans do have a point saying that, the Democrats were for the wall before Trump was for it. Right. It's just the Democrats are holding firm on this. We're not going to use the government shutdown as the bargaining chip for that wall.
So let's spend a bit of time breaking down last week's big story from BuzzFeed. I wanted to talk a bit about the broader implications of this story for media in particular. Just to give a bit of background to our listeners, so on January 17, BuzzFeed News published a report alleging that President Trump directed his longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about negotiations to build this Moscow Trump Tower. The source of that allegation was said to be 2 federal law enforcement officials involved in the investigation of the matter. The story also claimed that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office learned about Trump's directive from Cohen to lie to Congress through interviews with witnesses from the Trump Organization, as well as internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of other documents. Jared, we'll talk about Mueller's response to that story in a second, but if these allegations are proven to be true, we're really talking about sort of impeachment territory here, aren't we? I mean, this is sort of suborning perjury and obstruction of justice, similar to Bill Clinton's impeachment.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember here that impeachment is a political move. It is not a legal one. Yeah. So while the Department of Justice is in charge of the law, you can't really be impeached until the politicians agree to impeach them. And so what you have here is what many are calling a smoking gun. Now, what's interesting here is that, they could, if they wanted to, impeach Trump tomorrow for a litany of issues that they deem to be un-American. But what happened is you have the precedence of the Watergate controversy, where people were waiting for that smoking gun. They were waiting for that Nixon lied. Nixon knew this and he lied about it, or he told someone to lie about it. And it's one thing to lie about it, and that's something that, unfortunately, what Trump has become well known for at this point. It's another thing to tell someone to perjure themselves and under oath lie about it. And so this would be the smoking gun that people would liken to being Nixon telling other folks to perjure themselves.
Okay.
So this was really what many saw to be, myself included, to be a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the big caveat is the if true.
Yes. So about one day after BuzzFeed published this story, the special counsel's office issued a pretty rare statement. It read, BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. So a response from the special counsel's office to a media report has pretty much been unheard of during the course of this investigation. Why do you think it felt the need to respond to this story in particular?
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable. That special counsel external affairs rep, I think his name is Peter Carr, and they call him Peter No Comment Carr.
Right.
He is known for just shooting down every single comment that people ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many things going on here. It's really interesting. One, you have the Democrats now in control of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And Democrats, when they heard this BuzzFeed news story saying, all right, let's move to investigate this, you didn't have that under Republican-controlled Congress.
Yeah,
and so there's one incentive there from the social counsel's office to be like, hold on, wait for the House of Reps investigation into this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not clear yet. Now, a second really interesting thing here is it's not clear what part of this is not accurate.
Yes, they haven't specified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's like pretty legalese.
Yeah.
And so it could be all of it is not accurate. It could be some of it is not accurate. Could be a tiny bit is not accurate. And it's no one, and BuzzFeed themselves have publicly said, please tell us what's not accurate. But then a third thing is, one of the reasons why the special counsel is not commenting on things is that they don't want to give in to fishing expeditions.
Yeah.
They don't want to be the let's just list a bunch of possible options, and then the special counsel will refute 3 of them. Yeah. So that means the 4th one is accurate.
Yes.
You know? So they err on the side of no comment, and there's been a whole process story now in the Washington Post about how they came to that no comment and how they had, if only BuzzFeed had been more extensive in how they detailed what the story was about, then they would have properly refuted it. But again, you have a special counsel's communications department that just says no comment to everything. Yeah. So they sent like a 1-paragraph story saying, hey, we have a story that Trump told Michael Cohen to lie. And per usual, Peter Carr came back saying we're going to have to go no comment on this one. And then, of course, once it blew up, then they provide the comment. Yeah. But it's still, there's so many moving parts on this that it's sort of hard to wrap your head around it.
There's a lot at stake for them here, isn't there? They've constantly had to battle this perception, both from within media and outside it, that they're not a serious news organisation. And that's despite a strong record on stories like this Moscow Trump Tower story in the past.
Yeah. So BuzzFeed, led by Ben Smith, who's a alum of Politico, they, for a decade now, have had BuzzFeed News, and they've broken a number of confirmed stories on the Trump administration. And at the same time, though, their sort of way of getting revenue is those memes and those listicles. And Ben Smith is open about that, the chief editor of BuzzFeed News. And it's just, that's their revenue model. Yeah. So it should be noted that the 2 writers on that story, one is a Pulitzer Prize winner. Right. The other is a Pulitzer Prize finalist. They're both serious journalists. They both come with serious journalistic chops.
Yeah, and they've worked on this story for a long time.
Yeah, they said they worked on it for months. Yeah. And they are completely 100% confident. There's no wavering in it. They've done subsequent interviews where people have said, could you have possibly gotten this wrong? No. Could your sources have possibly gotten this wrong? No. They've been pretty upfront and confident, saying, no, this is completely right, and we think over time we will be vindicated. And to be fair, that has happened in a few instances in the Trump administration so far.
More broadly, I imagine US journalists and sort of big media outlets out there are really nervous when it comes to this story, because if this is proven to be untrue, the president's going to use this to wage war on sort of so-called fake news, right? And potentially dampen any future allegations of collusions with Russians or obstruction of justice.
Completely, yeah. So Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were the 2 main figures at the Washington Post investigating Richard Nixon during the Watergate controversy. Yep. And Bob Woodward just recently said he is thankful that he is not covering the Trump administration's Russia controversy on a daily basis because this is so difficult.
Yeah.
There's so many dynamics at play here. So first you have an administration that plays, let's be honest, pretty fast and loose with the facts.
Yep.
And it's hard to know what they actually are. But secondly, you have a new media environment here where people want the news instantaneously.
Yeah.
They want it on Twitter. They want it on the internet. There's no waiting. There's no patience anymore.
Yeah.
And so you have a really difficult subject where you can't tell what the truth is. And sometimes oftentimes their own people don't even know what the truth is.
Yeah.
Then you have a media environment where people just want the truth right away.
Yeah.
And so it's so difficult to nail that down. When you have arguably the most respected DC insider journalist saying, I'm thankful I'm not doing this, that tells you how difficult this High Wire Act is.
No other major news organisations were able to verify these claims independently themselves. I've seen some criticism of the coverage, but is it realistic to sort of ask news organisations to not run with a story that's lit up social media and sort of come from an outlet which, until this point, had a solid track record on the Trump-Russia story?
Yeah, I mean, I think if BuzzFeed did this under the Obama administration, the other news outlets would also cover it ferociously.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think there's some sort of special standard here. And also, let's be honest, does it seem completely out of character for President Trump to ask someone to not tell the truth? It doesn't really meet the smell test there, in terms of it being completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a legitimate story, and they continued to stand by it. And they took months to do this. Yeah. These are legitimate journalists. They're confident in their stories. And it's just a waiting game now to see who's proven right.
Yeah. What do Democrats do here? Obviously, they've got the House committees available to investigate allegations like this. But realistically, they're going to wait till the Mueller report's released, right, before pursuing any kind of impeachment proceedings.
Yeah, it's interesting. Axios did a sort of informal poll of Democratic lawmakers, new Democratic lawmakers, I should say. Ones who, like you said, really were on the face of that Trump election, everyone talking about Trump in these midterm elections. And they asked them where they stood on impeachment. And the vast majority of them were against it.
Right.
They really are.
For the time being or altogether?
For the time being.
Okay.
For the time being. They don't want to rush this. They see that as like a one-shot opportunity, and they don't want to waste their shot when something is not rock solid. And I think the interesting thing in all this BuzzFeed controversy is it legitimizes the Bob Mueller investigation because now you have Republicans in Trump saying even Bob Mueller calls this incorrect.
Yeah.
And Bob Mueller's somewhat now more legitimate because he's actually calling things
trusting
exactly
what
he's building a sort of a notoriety for independence.
Yeah.
And I think that's really valuable to Mueller. But going back to the Democrats, they don't want to waste their one-shot opportunity.
Yeah.
They really want to make sure that they are on solid ground and they can, and when they do the articles of impeachment, which by the way, they like 1, 2, or 3 of them have done.
Yeah.
I think one did it last year. And again, no one went for it.
Yeah.
But when they do it, and as the whole Democratic Party and Congress do it, they want to make sure that it's not a waste opportunity and that the Senate Republicans will go for it as well.
I should mention as well, if anyone wants to read anything further on the Democrat-controlled committees in the House of Representatives, Bruce Wolpe has a great brief on the United States Study Center website that was out last week looking at the new leadership of those committees and the effect they're likely to have on the Trump administration. Jared, let's take a moment to discuss Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer and really a de facto press secretary at this point, given how much media he does. Let's have a listen to a few of his comments in media interviews over the past week.
I never said there was no collusion between the campaign or between people in the campaign.
Yes,
I
you
have no idea if I have not. I said the President of the United States. There is not a single bit of evidence the President of the United States committed the only crime you could commit here, conspired with the Russians to hack the DNC. He's pleading guilty to get a reduced sentence, which means he's saying what the prosecutor wants him to say.
But you just acknowledged that President Trump might have talked to him about his testimony.
And so what if he talked to him
about it? Is it not possible that Michael Cohen had that conversation? And I'm just asking you for what happened or what didn't happen.
It's not possible.
That President Michael Cohen left the conversation thinking, well, this is what the boss wants me to say. The boss wants me to say.
Not possible. The guy driving this testimony was Michael Cohen.
Jared, he's not really helping the president at this point, is he? He's saying that it's perfectly normal for Trump to talk to Cohen before congressional testimony, but it isn't normal for subjects of or witnesses in a congressional investigation to discuss testimony with each other, is it?
No, it isn't. But, you can sort of see the strategy of trying to sort of muddy the waters, where you're trying to sort of mix up what is right, what is wrong. You're trying to move the goalposts. You're not giving a consistent, like, this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
You're constantly changing your story. And you can say that you can see it strategically. That sort of helps the Trump administration, like, not be nailed to any one red line that they've defined as being incorrect.
Right.
Whether it be they're doing that Russian tower project in early 2016 or late 2016.
And how long they were discussing it up until after the election.
Whether there's collusion on the campaign, whether it's only collusion with the president. Just moving these goalposts, moving the targets and changing the story that helps you, you could say strategically, not be nailed to any one thing. At the same time, it seems like there's a lot of backtracking when Rudy Giuliani, or after Rudy Giuliani goes on camera.
So you think, so comments like this, he's moving at the goalpost last week when he claimed that he never said there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. You think that there's a real method to this kind of madness, that they are planning that he's going to go out there and say these things to kind of confuse the issue? Or is it just a case that he's going out there and he doesn't really know what he's going to say and it just ends up, sounding ridiculous and getting himself in trouble because there is no plan, there is no method to this?
Oh, yeah, you don't want to add too much strategic thinking when there isn't.
12-dimensional chess.
Exactly. Yeah. But, I can see it being the latter, and it most likely is that. But I can also see the advantages of the confusing messaging.
Okay.
And if there's anything that President Trump likes, it's good TV personalities, and Giuliani is engaging, and he's passionate. He's a passionate defender, and he gets ratings, and he keeps moving the goalposts, and so you can't really nail down Trump on anything.
Jared, we'll leave things there. Thanks so much for joining us to help kick off the year.
My pleasure.
A big thank you to Lobo Loco, Ketzer and Chad Crouch for their musical talents this week, and as always, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences for their studio assistance. We'll see you next week for another episode of 2020 Vision.